Hey everyone, today we're checking out the game Capes. It's a turn-based combat game in which we control a small squad of superheroes fighting against dastardly villains. Conceptually, it's kind of like the love child of XCOM Chimera Squad and Midnight Suns. But the more important question is whether or not it's any good. The usual disclaimer here, I did receive a review key of the game, but this is not a sponsored video. The developer is actually an Australian company known as Spitfire Entertainment, so that's pretty cool, and I'll leave a link to the game in the description if you do want to check it out yourself. The version of the game you're going to be watching in this video is the preview build. It contains the entire first act of the game. The final product will have 3 acts total, and one of the devs has told me that Act 2 is the largest of the 3. As of the time of recording this video, the game is set to release in late May, so I'm planning on this video coming out shortly before that. The basic setting of the game is a bit like the graphic novel Old Man Logan, if you've ever seen that. Basically, in King City, where our heroes reside, the supervillains defeated the superheroes, or Capes as they're referred to, a couple of decades ago. Since then, the company that runs the city, and yes, that is what they're called, the company, they've outlawed superpowers. As soon as they find anyone with powers, a plethora of armed goons will descend upon that person and detain them. Now, where do these superpowered individuals end up? Well, we're not exactly sure at this stage, but I'm guessing it's probably nowhere good. In the tutorial, we take control of 2 Capes in training, Facet and Rebound. These 2 have been recruited by an old-time superhero named Doctrine. He's a man who is a relic from the time when superheroes were still welcome in King City. Doctrine found these 2 rookies before the company did, and with his help they've been able to avoid capture. And this battle is actually their first taste of combat. Facet's power allows him to cover himself in crystals, and he basically serves as a tank. Rebound is able to teleport, and she's a bit of a glass cannon, hit and run type of character. She can deal big damage and then teleport away to avoid getting hit, since she is quite fragile. The turn system uses the Chimera Squad approach. Each individual unit is placed in the turn queue, so you can't necessarily control all of your heroes at the same time, or in the order that you want to control them. And I do have to be honest, I prefer XCOM 2's approach where you can just choose who you want to control. The issue is, when you can't control the order of your moves, it can make synergizing abilities more difficult to pull off. But this is just a personal preference. Movement is like Phoenix Point in that we don't have to use all our movement at once. We can move a little, use an ability, and then keep moving if we want to, and this gives us a lot of flexibility when it comes to positioning. In addition to moving, we can actually use 2 abilities per turn. Now, using abilities is how you're going to attack enemies, but they can also do lots of other things. Facet can taunt enemies so they'll only target him on the next turn. He can also cover an enemy in crystals, preventing them from being able to move. There's a lot of variety, and you'll unlock even more abilities as you progress in the game. In addition, if 2 Capes are standing close enough together, they can combine abilities. Rebound can teleport other units around the map to a certain distance. Meanwhile, Facet can allow others to add some crystal material to their attack, which means it's going to inflict more damage. And as if all that wasn't enough, each hero also has an ultimate ability. Facet can lock multiple enemies in place with his crystal growths. Rebound can launch a flurry of attacks across random enemies over an AoE. And these ultimate abilities don't cost an action point either. So if you've got one, you can use that plus your 2 regular abilities all in the one turn. That's really cool. The catch with these things is you have to build up the ultimate meter in order to use the ability. And each character will build up this meter in different ways. Facets increases when he takes damage. Rebounds goes up when she performs backstabs, an attack from the enemy's rear. Now, I know in that short amount of time I've kind of bombarded you with a lot of mechanics there, and I'm doing that to highlight something here. This is a fairly complex game. There's a lot of factors to consider when attempting optimal strats. But at the same time, I never felt overwhelmed by the information I was receiving, so the tutorial does a good job at introducing these concepts. And speaking of the tutorial, obviously we've been fighting this behemoth of a man, Crash Damage. Now, given his arms are the size of an entire regular adult, I'm guessing this guy has some superpowers. But see, he's working for the company, and I guess that's what's keeping him from being abducted like everybody else. Our fight ends up leading us to the subway under the road, and a train very helpfully carries Crash Damage away for us. So we live. For today at least. Now, the whole reason this fight started was because Crash Damage was hunting a rogue superhero. We stepped in to help her, and the civilians getting caught in the crossfire. But she just completely bailed on us, leaving our newbies to fight this beast of a man. So let it be known, even if you're a superhero, you can still be a jerk. And speaking of jerks, Crash Damage's boss is very unhappy with him for failing to catch the superhero. And even though this guy is shrouded in darkness, his design looks really interesting. And I should also say here, I love the comic book presentation of the game, like the speech bubbles the characters have. When I first booted up the game, I was actually confused why I couldn't find an option to enable subtitles, but now I know why. They're in the speech bubbles. And I actually wish the game had played up to this a bit more, like maybe with cel-shaded graphics. That might have worked really well in this game, but I'm not a developer, I don't know how viable that would be. And the game looks fine anyway. Now meanwhile, our heroes are hanging out in Doctrine's underground lair, for lack of a better word. Once it was a Justice League style HQ for heroes, but these days, well, it looks like my house. And we can see here the news blaming the civilian casualties on us instead of the actual culprit, Crash Damage and his lackeys. And this will be a recurring theme in the game. Civilians will often respond to us with fear, since the media is giving us the J. Jonah Spider-Man treatment. And this ties into the broader premise of the game that Doctrine is effectively leading an underground resistance. He's a hero from the glory days, but now he lives in the shadows trying to recruit new heroes to fight back against a corrupt and totalitarian regime. So the setting is kind of similar to XCOM 2 in that sense. Anyway, Doctrine has detected another superpowered person, so our duo race to the location, hoping to get there before the company's goons. But of course, we're too slow, so we're in for another fight. The game introduces the disarming mechanic here. We can use an action to knock an enemy's weapon out of their hands. But you do want to be careful, some enemies will take multiple disarming attacks before it works. And enemies can pick up weapons even after they've been dropped. However, doing that will use up their turn, so they won't be able to attack you at the same time. And you may want to make disarming enemies with guns a priority. Most units in this game cannot make melee attacks diagonally, so being able to remove an enemy's firearm while also being able to stunt their movement with Facet can make it super easy to avoid their attacks. Now, I will mention here, I'm not a massive fan of the controls. See, there's no ability to scroll the map by moving the mouse to the edges of the screen. On top of that, in order to move a unit, you have to first click on the move option and then click on where you want to go. You can't just click on where you want to go straight away. Now, I understand why the devs did this. If you click on a spot without having selected the move option, the camera will pan to where you click. So you can control the camera that way, and using this system, you don't have to worry about misclicks. And you can also move the camera with the WASD keys, which is nice. And the tactical maps for the most part are quite small, so the camera issues aren't a big deal, as you're probably not going to have to pan that often. But I would prefer mouse scrolling be an option. It's just the easiest way to do it. Anyway, once the goons are disposed of, we have Discount Professor X here. His name is Mindfire, and he's going to be the third member of our team. And this guy's pretty powerful. He has psychic powers, so not only can he read people's minds, but he can just float around the place. It's pretty cool. I like the design here. He also has some decent abilities like Vulnerable, which makes a targeted enemy take extra damage. His telekinesis attack lets him throw debris at an enemy to damage them, and what's really nice about that is that we now have some ranged attacks that we can use. So yeah, really nice addition to the team here. As we leave, we get a glimpse of some Karen stalking us. Not sure what that's about at this stage. For the next mission, we're seemingly out of the tutorial and we have some choice over where we deploy. Now there's both campaign missions and patrol missions. Now I think the difference is that patrol missions aren't related to the main plot of the game. But in addition to these two things, there's also the simulator, and this thing lets us replay previous missions. Now why on earth would we want to do that? Well, let's have a look at this patrol mission that we haven't played yet. You'll see here there's a lengthy list of optional objectives in the top left corner, and as the mission proceeds, I fail almost all of them. Now some of them, like not having any heroes get knocked out, that was totally my fault. Like check this out.
Damn it! Fire's cheating!
Yeah, I stupidly used our teleport attack right on top of the explosive barrel. So not my best play in the world. And the way the game lagged out there, I'm pretty sure that's my Lemon PC, not the game. But the end result is that Rebound is now on very low health, and that leads to her getting KO'd. And yeah, I can only blame myself for this one. Now in terms of the KO mechanic, if a cape loses all their HP, they become knocked out. You've got 2 turns to revive them, otherwise they're visiting the Shadow Realm. And if that happens, you lose the mission and it's going to be a reload. And I think there's a hardcore mode where this will actually cause you to lose the whole game. I'm not going to be playing that one. Now when we do revive our hero, they return with 50% max HP. Now that's bad enough since Rebound's HP is already terribly low, but it obviously means that they can get knocked out again more quickly. And once you revive a hero with 1 HP maximum health, well, if they get KO'd again, at that point it's instant death. So being knocked out is not a good thing. You want to avoid it at all costs. And I like this system. I get that these character-driven games can't always have permadeath, but this is a nice solution. You are highly incentivized to avoid getting KO'd, and it works really well. So yeah, failing that optional objective, that one's on me. A couple of the others though, not so much. Like completing the mission within 4 turns, there's just no way. It is not possible with our current damage output. And then there's also using Facet's Shield Shard ability. I haven't even unlocked that yet, so we're certainly not going to be able to do that. And so this is where the simulator comes in. We can return to the mission and replay it at any point. After we've upgraded our heroes, for example, we might want to go back once we have the Shield Shard ability, then we'll be able to meet that objective. Or we might even want to go back after we've recruited another cape and we can deploy 4 soldiers instead of 3. So the simulator provides you the opportunity to complete those optional objectives if you weren't able to the first time. And it's a nice lore-friendly way to do it too. I like this as a concept. Now that leads to the question, why would you care about the optional objectives? And the reason is because they provide SP. Now characters will gain XP from completing missions, and this will cause them to level up and they'll unlock new skills or the ability to upgrade existing skills. However, to actually purchase and use these things, you need to spend SP. SP can be obtained from optional objectives in missions, as well as completing certain challenges with the heroes. Like I think Rebound has one where you get some SP if you do a certain amount of backstabs as an example. So yeah, optional objectives, you want to pay attention to them. They are going to be crucial in making your heroes stronger. Then the next mission is actually a stealth one. We need to steal a laptop and we can potentially do it without being detected by the enemies. Not me though. I get spotted. Now while that's not great, since Rebound can teleport both with an action and with her movement, she is really mobile. Like she can move a long way in 1 turn. And so even though we are detected, we actually avoid taking any damage. we can just zip around the area, breaking the enemy's line of sight so we don't get hit. This is pretty great. And something I do really like about the game is that the enemy turns pass very quickly. You're not left sitting there for an eternity while the AI figures out what it's going to do. So nice, fast-paced gameplay. That's what we want. Now from this heist, we learn that the Capes who the company are abducting are being taken to something called Project Alpha. Apparently the government is starting to ask questions about the company's conduct, and Doctrine's cynicism here is just so good. He's not trusting the government to get anything useful done. This man is my spirit animal. So he ventures off to discuss the situation with who I am assuming is this game's version of Superman. He certainly looks the part. And he might be the only hero we've found so far who actually wears a cape, so he's living up to the namesake. However, he refuses to help us unless we can present hard evidence of the company's crimes. Now, I love this guy's character design, but the main thing I'm wondering about is whether we're going to be fighting alongside him or fighting against him. But while we're on the topic, let's talk a bit more about the story. I really like it. There's plenty of characters, all with different backgrounds, motivations, and perspectives, and we're not exactly sure who we can trust. Is Doctrine a noble hero leading us to salvation, or a bitter old relic driven by hatred and sending us to our demise? Who can say? The woman stalking us, is she friend or foe? Is Doctrine a fool to be trusting Superman Light here? What sinister fate does Crash Damage's boss have in store for him? These are all questions being raised, and the web of intrigue is well and truly being spun. On top of this, we've actually met some people from Facets and Rebound's pasts as well, who I haven't even mentioned for the sake of brevity. I know, me talking about brevity. The irony is not lost. And I will be honest, I wasn't too interested in the characters' personal side tales, but again, that's just a personal preference thing. I found the main plot of the game to be much more compelling. But the point is, there's no movie nights, no high school drama, no emo kids club, no having to run around Karen's backyard just so we can buy upgrades. What we have here is a proper fight of good versus evil, with a whole lot of questions about what side of that conflict each character's loyalties are on. And all of this story development is happening within the first 2 hours of the game, so we're barely scratching the surface. Yeah, this is what we should have gotten from Midnight Suns. Anyway, back to the action. We've located the jerk version of Speedy Gonzales, and we rock up to try and recruit her to the team, but once again, company thugs are here. And this is actually the first mission we lose. Our goal is to protect Speedy from the goons, and I figured she'd be much better at staying alive than what she actually is. She's really not very good at it at all, and she does get taken down. That costs us the mission. And the real problem is, even though she's fighting alongside us in this one, she's not under my control. So falling back with her isn't an option. So now we need to restart the mission. Now, one of the developers who worked on the game was actually in the Twitch chat while I was streaming, which was really cool, and they gave me some great insights about the game's mechanics while I was playing. One such insight was about Shield Shard, that ability I mentioned earlier that we don't have. The dev informed me that ability could be used on Speedy and it would protect her from taking damage. So that would obviously make this mission much easier. And it only clicked with me later after the stream, the way the game had used Shield Shard as an optional objective on the previous mission. That was actually giving me a not so subtle hint that Shield Shard is an ability we should really be picking up. Kind of foreshadowing that it would come in very useful in the near future. That's some really nice game design, and I wish I had picked up on it sooner. Soon enough for this mission, in fact. Like I said, it would have made this encounter easier. But nonetheless, without Shield Shard, there's only one option. We gotta charge in as fast as we can with Facet and hope the bad guys target us and not the Speedster. We can use Taunt and Growth, which is our crystal ability, to manipulate the enemies to an extent. But overall, we are still hoping on some RNG kindness here. And things actually get so bad, I end up leaving Rebound and Mindfire on the front line. Now, for the record, this is a horrible idea, They only have 3 HP, which is not a lot. To put that number into perspective, Facet has 6, and the absolute weakest enemies we have encountered up till now also have 3 HP. So needless to say, we do get some KOs again. However, as long as it's not on the speed star, we're not going to fail the mission, so it's all good. And we are able to win this one, I think, on the second attempt. Now, after the fight, Speedy once again blows us off, and her power is super speed, so obviously we're not going to be able to catch her. She's honestly starting to annoy me. Meanwhile, we have another cutscene with what I'm assuming is a bunch of super villains. And check out this old man looking Deadshot guy. Just from the back of him, he looks so cool. And the goons he's talking to have really interesting designs as well. I think one of them is Crash Damage's boss, who we saw earlier. Anyway, from this conversation, it sounds like the company isn't content with just ruling over King City. They're expanding their sites to the entire country. I should mention the audio here too. Since I was streaming, I didn't pay too much attention to the music, so I can't comment on that, but the voice acting is really good. The major characters are easily on par with most AAA games. Some of the generic goons sound a little bit stiff at times, but that's no big deal.
That's all you guys got?
Hardly a scratch.
Every time they hit me, I felt a rush. Like adrenaline, but something else.
Maybe getting hit channels your ultimate power.
Hey, let's not jump ahead now. How do you know all that? And who said we wanted you to join us? We're real exclusive.
No, you're not. I skimmed your mind while you were watching the house. He's kinda hard to read, but you're very loud.
The company has ties with Silicon Valley, with the military-industrial complex. They have powerful friends.
You've got nuclear muscles, and you're asking me what I think you can do.
You may not care for the bigger picture here, Wildstar, but we do. We're about to bring the entire country to heel. Don't let that old fool get in your way.
You worry too much.
Now, after that next mission, our stalker Karen returns, but she's looking infinitely cooler in this cutscene with her abilities active. So maybe she's gonna join us, maybe she'll be a boss fight, I guess we'll have to see. Then Doctrine has found what could be yet another cape, and so our trio sets out to investigate. And it's a pretty gruesome scene we stumble upon. Some people met a very unfortunate end, it seems. However, there is one super person who's still alive, so it's not too late to save him at least. But before we can do that, Crash Damage's boss shows up, and my goodness, this man loves the sound of his own voice. Like at one point he even makes a joke about how his monologue can't be interrupted, so at least the game is self-aware, I guess. It's playing up to the genre. And while he's blabbering on, this guy drops some more hints about Doctrine's seemingly dubious past. And this mission was really tough. This one had the medium difficulty. I think most of the missions previously were easy. And just the sheer number of enemies was really full on. I think it took me 3 attempts to beat this one because we just kept getting overwhelmed. So let's have a look at the winning battle. I adopt the incredible strategy of running away and hiding, like a coward. See, the bad guys have entered in 3 groups from 3 different directions. We move behind these cages, putting us in one far corner of the room. Now this has 2 effects. One, the bad guys have to run around the cages and other obstacles to reach us, and on one side, that actually forces them into single file formation. That's going to limit their ability to reach us, which is in turn going to limit their ability to gang up on us. The second is that we've moved our heroes towards one group of enemies and away from the other 2. This means we'll have time to engage one group and hopefully thin out their numbers before the other 2 groups reach us. And the strat is actually working really well. But we do want to be careful of Rebound's teleport attack. It does big environmental damage, and I do accidentally destroy some of the objects we're using as cover. Thankfully, none of them are explosive this time, and it doesn't end up being a problem. Once our position starts to get overrun, we relocate into another corner to hide in, and Rebound's team-up teleport is invaluable for this. She lets the slower Mindfire and Facet be able to cover ground just as quickly as she can. so putting space between us and the bad guys is extremely easy. We really are dividing and conquering here. And this may not be the most heroic strat in the world, going and hiding in the corner, but it does prove very effective, and that's really the only thing that I care about. And so after losing this mission twice, not only do we win this attempt, we dominate. We complete all the optional objectives, including not having any heroes getting KO'd. And our reward for our efforts is pretty amazing. A 4th hero in Weathervane here. We were able to rescue him, and now he's willing to join the team. He has lightning powers, and he's quite powerful. For example, I used the simulator for the first time, and we revisit the level where I accidentally blew Rebound up on the barrel. And you know how last time I said it was basically impossible for us to win in 4 turns to get that optional objective? Well, this time, because we can bring 4 capes, including Weathervane, we beat that same mission in 3 turns. It was absolute devastation, and Weathervane here is definitely a big part of the reason for our success.
Jesus, he'll fry anything that gets near him.
The team finds another super, but this one has apparently lost his mind. He's unconscious outside the sewer system. Take from that whatever implications you wish. But once he wakes up, he immediately goes ballistic and starts attacking random civilians. So we're the heroes, we need to save the day. And this mission is pretty much a glorified tutorial teaching us the importance of disarming. And again, if I was paying more attention, straight after this mission I would have gone and leveled up all the disarming abilities that I could. Cause yeah, the game is giving us a hint here. But the thing about this mission is, with the disarming mechanic, it works a little bit differently on superpowered enemies versus regular goons. See, the supervillains have their own ultimate attacks that they can use against us. But if we inflict enough disarming points on them, we can shut that ability down, preventing them from using it. So in addition to that tidbit, I also learned here that some of the superpowered enemies actually have more than one health bar. We can just murk him anyway, so who cares?
Ah, my power
Oh, what?
is growing.
What? 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 Did his health just regen completely? Oh, because he's got those 2 dots. Oh, God. Oh, no. So yeah, that's a thing. And we actually have to deplete this guy's health bar 3 times to take him out for good. So that's a little bit rough, but truth be told, this was a pretty easy mission. There was only 1 enemy, and he wasn't too much of a problem for us. Meanwhile, the villains have located Discount Speedy Gonzales, and they send Crash Damage to take her out once and for all. Now, for some reason, unbeknownst to me, the team of capes still hasn't given up on the Speedster, so we head out to save her. For a 3rd time. I'm gonna be honest, if this were up to me, when we've saved her life twice and she's blown us off twice, I would be leaving her to her fate right now. But I guess I'm just too petty to be a superhero. And this mission, I think, is our first hard difficulty encounter. And my goodness, does it live up to its namesake. Think this one took me about 5 or 6 attempts to beat, and I was getting pretty frustrated. On one side of the map we have Crash Damage, who is charging up an ultimate attack. We need to use our disarming attacks to make sure he doesn't hit us with it. And the problem with disarming attacks is they don't do a lot of HP damage. Most of them do 0 HP damage, in fact. I mean, the point of them is to focus on disarming, not removing HP. So we're kind of forced to choose between inflicting damage on the enemy or preventing damage to ourselves. Now honestly, we'd like to do both those things, but it's not always possible. And that's to say nothing of the absolute legion of goons who are going to join in on this fight. Meanwhile, a little ways away from that, we have Speedster downed on the map and a bunch of thugs moving in to finish her off. I don't think we fail the mission if they do take all her health though, it's just an optional objective to prevent that happening. Now I was actually hoping we'd be able to revive her so she could join the fight, but no luck, it's not an option. I mean, this is the Speedster. Why am I expecting her to be helpful? Learn your lesson, Drifter. But by far the most annoying thing about this mission is the very beginning. It's got a tutorial of how Weathervane's ultimate ability works. Now basically he has a chain lightning attack that can hit multiple enemies, and every enemy it hits adds to his ultimate bar. Once it maxes out, he has a big AoE he can use to damage all the enemies around him. Now, I already know how to use his ultimate. I showed it on that previous simulator mission, so I don't need this tutorial. In of itself, it's not a big deal, but the worst part is that every time you reload the mission, you have to play this tutorial again. And it is really, really annoying. Putting a mandatory tutorial in a really tough mission that people are probably going to have to restart, I don't think was the best idea. And to be honest, on the attempt that we finally did win, I'm not even entirely sure what I did differently. I think I did hold Rebound and Mindfire a little bit further back so they took less damage. The range on the goons' guns, even though it's obviously longer than a melee attack, it's not infinite, so you can still avoid attacks if you're far enough away, I think. Anyway, keeping them further back certainly would have helped. Another thing is that Crash Damage has a charging attack that lets him move really rapidly across the arena, but he can only do it in a straight line. So we want to stay on a diagonal away from him, and his regular movement is pretty low range, so the more time we can force him to spend waddling around the map uselessly, the better off we are. It means he has less time to be attacking us. I also used Weathervane as bait a little bit. He's reasonably bulky, so he can take a few hits, and the enemies clustering around him does work to our favour to an extent. His Chain Lightning ability jumps from one enemy to the next only if they're close enough together. So the more bad guys we have in a big bunch, the more of them we can hit in a single attack, and the faster we can charge that ultimate ability. And even in the winning attempt, it is still a close fight. At one point, half our team gets KO'd at the same time. But even though we've sustained big damage, so have the bad guys. We've taken out a lot of them. They had to work hard to get those 2 KOs. So once I'm able to revive our 2 capes and we have 4 soldiers active again, we can inflict enough damage to secure the victory. But yes, certainly the most challenging encounter so far. This one was rough. Afterwards, Crash Damage makes some vague reference to an impending doom, and in response to this, Mindfire actually invites him to join us. However, before anything can come of this, company goons swarm the scene and our team, with the Speedster in tow, are forced to flee. And at this point, the fake news actually throws Crash Damage under the bus and blames him for the destruction at the scene of the fight. It seems he's failed one too many times and is no longer being protected by the company. So I'm assuming Crash Damage is about to have a very, very bad day. Meanwhile, Speedster, whose name is actually Mercurial, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, she finally joins our team. 3rd time's the charm, I guess. And that's actually the end of Act 1. We're not quite done though, as the preview build does have a couple of missions from Act 2, so I decided to play one of them, and this one gives us a bit of insight into Weathervane's personal life. Now in Act 2, it seems like the company goons have leveled up. Some of them have rifles that do big damage compared to the handguns they were wielding earlier. Meanwhile, others have electric batons that can reduce the number of abilities we can use in a turn from 2 down to 1. So there's some pretty brutal attacks we need to watch out for. We can only deploy 4 heroes at a time despite having more than that in our barracks, so you are going to have to choose which people you want to bring. And I actually really like the game has a recommendation feature, so it will pick the best heroes for that particular mission. And when you don't know what the mission's going to be about, that's really handy to have. So I'm trying out Mercurial on this one, even though she is obnoxious and I don't really like her. She does have some nice abilities though. Her team-up abilities actually add disarming capabilities to our other capes. And it's during this mission I start to understand how important disarming is. Being able to strip away the deadly weapons the company goons are holding, plus negating supervillain abilities, I think these things are going to be key to survival. The difference between a goon holding a rifle versus just his bare hands is night and day. Now once again, I do have to restart this mission a couple of times. They are getting more challenging, but in doing this, and with a bit of help from my developer friend, I do end up finding a crazy OP strat. See, what I hadn't realised is that Facet's crystal growths can actually be placed on empty tiles, not just on enemies. And by creating these crystal structures on empty tiles, we can block both the enemy's movement as well as their line of sight. Like here, the game throws a bunch of reinforcements at us, but we can just throw crystals in their way and completely cut them off. They can't see us, they can't reach us, they are totally helpless to intervene while we deal with the other enemies. It is beautiful. Now these crystals will collapse after a few turns, but we can always just build more to keep the enemies at bay for as long as we like. Or maybe we want to set up crystals to force the enemies to take a certain path that may benefit us. If we block off all the other parts, we can force them to go where we want them to be. And I think if I'd clued into this mechanic earlier, the game would have been much easier. This gives us so many options. I thought Facet was the weakest of the heroes, but now I'm thinking he might actually be the strongest. A lot of the time when I lost missions, it was because we were just getting overwhelmed by too many enemies. Now part of that was me being too aggressive. We can't always alpha strike the bad guys in this game. This is not XCOM 2. And sometimes just being able to command the battlefield, reducing the enemy's options and forcing them to do the things we want them to do, well, that can be a lot more useful than outright damage. So I think there is a bit of a puzzle element to the missions where it may take you a few attempts to figure out the best way to approach things, and I imagine most fans of strategy games are going to enjoy this approach. And yeah, that's about as much of the game that I've played at this point in time, and my overall thoughts on the preview build are really positive. If you're after a reasonably deep and at times pretty challenging turn-based tactics game, I think this may be a good way to scratch that itch. There's definite similarities to Chimera Squad's gameplay in terms of the mechanics, but it thankfully avoids the cringe of Midnight Suns. And we spend the majority of the time playing in the battles rather than running around in a friendship simulator. So the game is doing all the right things, as far as I'm concerned at least. Now given this was a preview build, it's not the full game, so obviously I can't comment on how much content the actual game will have, but just to give you an idea, I spent about 6.5 hours on the preview build, which is the content that I've talked about in this video. And as you've seen, we have encountered quite a few characters who we have unfinished business with. I'm guessing quite a few of them are going to come up as boss fights later on. So I imagine there's not going to be a shortage on the content front, but again, we will have to wait until the full game to see. And yeah, that's going to do it from me. So I hope you enjoyed hearing about Capes. If you did, please consider the usual things of liking, commenting, and subscribing. I do also have a Patreon. For only a few bucks a month, you can get early access to videos just like this one. So I hope to see you for the next one, and until then, have a great day.